is language. It didn't actually get passed last year, but we're looking to have language, and there has been language circulated in the Senate and the House to provide some guardrails and kind of help prevent any decision-making that shuts out. Last year was to have language in the National Defense Authorization Act that directed the Army to consult directly with Native Hawaiians as part of any lease negotiation process. And that's something that we continue for, is to ask that the Army engage with OHA directly on behalf of Native Hawaiians. Next slide, please. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I heard your whole question. Do you mind?
Aloha. I just wanted to understand Kapa'akai analysis. It was 2000 that it was approved and has to document all development on all property. We had an instance where the U.S. Army garrison had given an understanding that they are exempt from doing that. That's one. And then private landowner that recently purchased lands up in Halemano, 3,300 acres to do development up there. They also reneged on doing the Kapa'akai. I don't know what their purpose is because they're required as one developer, yeah. So I just wanted to understand that. And then the second question would, 2006, OHA sued the United States Army garrison for, I guess, a striker brigade thing. Was the outcome in favor of Kanaka Maoli, or we just, that was put on the side and we don't know what actually coming of it? Thank you.
Mahalo. So I'll repeat the question as I understood it. So you asked about a private developer and also the Army saying that they're not subject to Kapa'akai, which is technically correct. It's the state government and the county government that is bound by the Constitution, and it's those entities. So in this case, it's the Board of Land and Natural Resources. If they were to issue a lease or to approve a land exchange, they are the entity who is responsible for complying with the Constitution and doing that analysis as part of any, in this case, land disposition, lease or land exchange, or anything that it would approve related to that, those military leases. So it's the Board of Land and Natural Resources in this case that's responsible. And often with a private project developer, similarly, it would be the county agency issuing the permit, or whoever on the government side has the power to green light that project to go ahead. Your second question, I'm not sure I know the full answer to. It's a 2006 striker lawsuit, and I do know that there were some increased access to the ihau site at Schofield, and some more archaeological inventory surveys that were done as part of the settlement to that lawsuit. But I would have to follow up with you to get more information about exactly the outcome for that. But I do know it did increase access and inventory, which allows for protection, right? The point of an archaeological inventory survey is then to make sure that if there's destructive activity, that those sites are protected.
I don't like sitting in front. But anyway, could you find out in that lawsuit if realty, which is guided by an EIS, environmental impact statement, and then training is guided by pragmatic agreement? There is a difference between the two, because in a pragmatic agreement, all is completely destroyed after 1906, whenever they started their training. And that's why we were afforded the opportunity to go out. I don't know if a lawsuit would help because it really didn't disclose any further information. And this became critical because from 2000 till now, I still going out there every time they have one control land to see what actually is occurring out there. And from the beginning, when it first went out, you could make the 3 tiers of the ihau, which had one ordinance right in the center. They supposedly had taken that out. My concern is that training exercise, pragmatic agreement does not protect an historical property.
Yeah, we would be happy to follow up with you further and consult with the staff who might have.
Aloha Kako, I heard you say the county and the state government has to comply with Paka'ai, yeah?
Mhm.
So Wahiawā Falls, the waterfall, Board of Water Supply claims to own the land. Must they, I can go there Monday through Friday. Take my mo'opuna over there.
Mm.
Saturday and Sunday, they have police officers over there. No can go by. Would that apply to Board of Water Supply?
Yes, and if we could discuss that more afterwards, because I feel like there's a few different
Well, I just thought,
issues.
an example.
Yeah, yeah. They might have done one at some point and still concluded that they can regulate access. They can, yeah. I'm happy to discuss it more with you afterwards. Okay, so yeah, kind of breezing through the rest of this, you can kind of read through the points itself, but we continue to engage at the DC level. I don't know if Summer wants to speak to the delegation that went to DC this past spring to meet with decision makers both in the Department of Defense and on the congressional side.
Yeah. So we took our voices, no different than, you know, our ancestors did, to Washington, D.C. to make sure that our perspectives and our rights and what we are trying to safeguard is heard through the halls of Congress and with the Department of Defense, now the Department of War. And I will say that, you know, surprisingly, I'll give you a little insight. Right now, as you know, there are a number of legal challenges confronting many of our Native Hawaiian serving institutions, Kamehameha Schools, Papa'ololokahi, the Health Scholarship Program, and DHHL, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands now. And all of those are based on federal laws, the idea that they're diminishing our political, special political and trust relationship with the federal government and trying to couch our rights within racial terms. And that landscape right now, all of those federal challenges and the courts that are entertaining these cases are really fraught. They're not really friendly to our issues. And so the sort of like the burden and the blessing of OHA is that it has this semi-autonomous state character. Now, in our community, it has been a divisive kind of character at times, right? Like it's difficult to trust an agency that has ties and links to the state of Hawaii if you believe in earnest that this is a situation that never got resolved after the 1893 overthrow. In this moment, that particular state character has some protections. And I say that because OHA has an existence that is both 1 foot in the federal trust relationship and 1 foot in our Admissions Act, our state constitution, and all of the statutes that were developed around OHA's existence and its authority. And so in this landscape that is fraught around federal laws, what we decided is that when we were going to go to DC, we were going to cloak ourselves in the state constitution that established us and all of the state statutes that speak to states' rights, which if you are also following Democratic and Republican sort of principles, the Republican Party, which is now in control, really values states' rights, right? Like they like when states protect their boundaries and their lands and their people and rely on their constitutions and all the laws that that safeguard what is important to them. And in Hawaii, thankfully, in 1978, the residents of Hawaii decided that Native Hawaiians were a group worth protecting, that our resources and our claims to our lands are worth enshrining in the most powerful pronouncement of our laws in this state. And so we took that message to Congress and to a number of Republican leaders who sit at the heads of the the armed services committees on both the House and the Senate. And that particular part of our story really resonated with them. And they said, of course, well, why would a state agree to the federal government or the military condemning their lands? And, you know, if your state constitution and your state laws say that Native Hawaiians are recognized peoples, and they understand that because they understand the Native American recognition process, then, you know, we were surprised to find allies in that space, quite frankly. And I think what is telling is that in a matter of months, the conversation here locally moved from inevitability of condemnation, and maybe a friendly one, to be more palatable to the people of Hawaii, to an articulation by the Congress very recently in the last couple of weeks to ʻaʻole. There is no condemnation in the language that authorizes or appropriates money for what the Army can do. They direct the Army to negotiate on a lease term as opposed to a condemnation with the state of Hawaii. And then they also order the Army to finish its incomplete environmental impact statement. And for us, Hawaiians, that means they've got to complete their kapa'akai analyses. The part of the story that informs everyone about our cultural practices, our natural and cultural resources that we want to safeguard, and, you know, chronicle that as robustly as possible, and make the argument for why their activities are going to impact those practices adversely, and then also what they need to do affirmatively to mitigate those impacts. So a lot of progress has been made in a really short time, and OHA cannot take all the credit for it. There are a number of coalitions and huis and community folks that are putting pressure on this conversation and on the decision makers to open up the space to make sure Native Hawaiian claims and this idea that, you know, our lands can just be stolen twice as completely unacceptable. So that is the update on the advocacy at the federal level. Yes. Oh, okay. It's not even $1 a year, $1 for the entire 64-year term. So $1 for the entirety of the 64-year lease term, which expires mostly in 2029, some through 2031, I believe. Yeah. Or DHHL. Yeah.
Leaning to where we ought to she's leading towards to where we ought to. The Hawaiian beneficiaries should start paying taxes. Now, why? I just want to know, how is that they don't have to on our ceded land and pay the minimum, and we who was born and raised here don't have that privilege, but we have to abide by the law that they make. I just, it hurts when they do that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if they're gonna lift the taxes for us beneficiaries, our land, and not lift, not rise the military's one.
So I don't have an answer to that, but what I think I want to hone in on what you just said that I think is really important to highlight is
That's
like,
an impact.
why did that happen in the first place? And for me, I think it's because Native Hawaiians weren't part of the negotiating process in 1964. I think the climate in 1964 didn't have the kind of education, didn't have the kind of community organizing, didn't have the kind of advocacy position, the political influence, the ability to, I think, bring community into these spaces in a really meaningful way, which is why we at OHA are fighting so hard to be at a table that might decide the next multi-generational lease or the land use, and have a say in that process in a way that we did not have a say back in 1964. And I think that we can change the landscape. I believe that it is our reason for honestly existing as an agency representing and advocating on behalf of Kanaka. Yes.
Aloha. Okay, so first of all, I want to mahalo you both and OHA for, the tremendous work you folks have been doing to kind of intervene in this process. I think in my lifetime, this has been the most visible and urgent action and reaction to really important issues. So I want to hapai ke la, leo mahalo ke ia. I have a question about OHA's strategic position, I guess, and vision around these negotiations. And I'm wondering, no, it's not for you. A few slides earlier, you guys listed the kind of priorities, OHA priorities. And one of the top ones was protecting ceded kingdom lands. And then a bit lower was this issue of maximizing revenue for those same lands. And in this moment, I'm wondering if OHA sees a possible contradiction in those two priorities, in so much as OHA will likely be, hopefully OHA's at the table, but if they are likely going to be the only real Native Hawaiian organization at the table around negotiation of these lands. Is there a conflict between trying to achieve the highest possible revenue for these trust lands and the need to protect these lands from continued desecration and military violence against our āina and people? So that's my first question. If within the organization there's conversation about that possibly being a conflict. And then the second question is whether or not OHA is prepared to make a strategic statement about their actual position on what they think should happen to these expiring leases, right? I think OHA has been very clear that there should not be condemnation, but does OHA have a stated position on whether or not there shouldn't be lease renewals in certain places like Pōhakuloa, like Makua, and the three other places, Kahuku, Po'omoho, now I just have to name them all. Kauai, Nohili. Is that on the table? Is OHA ready to say we don't want lease extensions, or is OHA still trying to find that out? Is OHA open to being pushed towards making a really clear declaration that we're going to fight against lease extensions? Is that something we, the community, can help kind of give back to? And sorry, I just want to make sure that's, yeah, that's basic. I see the way that that you folks are working kind of multiple tactics as once in a broader strategy. I think there's plenty of logic to that. Speaking to that conflict in the community historically on OHA being kind of a quasi-state institution, I know many of us are hoping for OHA to make a really clear declaration about what they hope we achieve through negotiation. And I'm wondering if OHA is ready or headed in that direction, or if it's just, we just want to be on the table to negotiate to get the best possible deal. Is that, yeah, mahalo.
Mahalo for the super thoughtful question. We are wrestling with the conflict, and ultimately the decision about which position we take isn't one that the administrators decide. That's one decided by the trustees themselves. And I'm just going to underscore that we have an election coming up, and a lot of the trustees are making, and new candidates, by the way, not just incumbents, but new candidates. I think if this is the moment, this is the issue for this time, then understanding very clearly which candidates you support and why will be very dispositive on how this ultimately turns out. There's I think five seats are open. So that's the majority. Or 5 is carries a majority vote, right? So there's that. I will also say that, you know, there is real clarity. The board voted on this, and I believe it was a unanimous board position and decision statement on opposing condemnation, and even going beyond that, opposing any permanent alienation of land, which necessarily means that even like land swaps, if you are severing title from the state of Hawaii to another entity, the federal, in this instance, the federal government and the military, then you are taking lands once stolen to be twice stolen, and that's unacceptable, right? So that is a very strong and clear position statement that OHA has taken. And I think that with respect to our continued advocacy for ensuring that the fair market value of these lands are realized, we believe we have a duty to do that. And I think I speak on behalf of the board when I say this, because our annual revenue, and that revenue is like our lahui's revenue, honestly, is derived from what comes, the 20% that comes from that inventory base, right? And so if there is a situation that becomes beyond OHA's control, and that requires some kind of valuation of those lands, we are going to advocate for the highest value afforded to those lands. And we are not going to limit ourselves just to traditional market value kind of assessments. We are going to, and we have been relying on our, we have a TAG, a technical advisory group made up of predominantly Native Hawaiians, but also Native Hawaiian allies who are committed to ensuring that OHA hears from diverse perspectives across the spectrum, folks who are not supportive of any renewed lease to people who are in the military, Native Hawaiians who are retired officers in the military, and trying to figure out where our best final position will be. We are not at the point of having a final position, but we have board meetings generally every 2 weeks, and we take testimony. And I think between now and the time that these leases are decided is an invitation for our beneficiaries, for community, to come and testify and make your voices heard at the table. It's the same, you know, how we're fighting to be heard at the table around the decision-making for these leases. Our beneficiaries need to also fight to be at the table, because the decision makers at OHA are or trustees. So I welcome that. So that's the conflict. And the second one, remind me of your question. It was a little more nuanced. Oh, yeah, where we are. Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes. Understood, understood. We introduced early on in the legislative session, which didn't pass, a ban on live fire training on any of these leased lands, and that failed. We're happy to resurrect a measure like that next legislative session, and we invite community to come and help us push that across the finish line. So such that if the military were to to extend their activities on these lands, that we stop doing the major injury that has, you know, wreaked havoc for a number of years. We support that. I think we would support another one. Do you have any additional, Mana'o, to add to the question?
No, I would just underscore what Summer already said. And as the author of that slide, I want to clear up any, you know, misconception that we are looking just like as a money-making opportunity, and very much the fact that the state's prior valuation of the land, if we were to be forced down the path of another lease, was just looking at traditional real estate. That doesn't, of course, incorporate any of the opportunity costs of Native Hawaiians not being able to access those lands. So we're really trying to incorporate those cutting edge senses of ways of how do you value what is traditionally ignored from a market value. So definitely it's an ongoing conflict in OHA's role, but in this sense, nobody's looking to try and maximize income. Mahalo.
I just have a question, like out of curiosity. So when I was looking into the NDAA a few days ago, I saw like through the language with the US code, I think it is 2667, that's what requires the military to abide to lease negotiations. But I only saw that stated for Pōhakuloa and Kahuku. Is it possible on behalf of OHA or DLNR to make sure like the verbiage is explicit so that that also applies to Po'amoho and Makua and the rest of the lands, or has a decision already like been made on those lands?
So we haven't talked to the authors of that provision, but what we do know is that even though the Army's EIS was rejected, there was a record of decision issued for the Pōhakuloa and the Oahu EIS. And what the Army said in its record of decision was that it's actually going to return Makua, it's going to return Po'amoho, and it's going to return actually the majority of the Kahuku lands, and they're just going to retain 450 acres. I believe it's the Makai side if you look at the map. So they've already gone on the record saying that they're going to return the land. So that might be why the language that was proposed was limited to completing the EIS for Pōhakuloa and Kahuku. I don't know if we'd agree with that, but I think that would explain why it might be limited to those areas, because Makua, Po'amoho, and the majority of Kahuku, except for that parcel, are in fact, according to the Army's record of decision it issued, already kind of committed to coming back to the state of Hawaii. So it's really, as far as the lease continuation, they haven't issued a record of decision for Kauai yet. That EIS hasn't gone before the board. And the Army hasn't, in that case, actually the Navy hasn't issued its final decision, but they have for Pōhakuloa and the Oahu military leases. So that's why we know what their stated intention is as far as land retention and land return. Although again, for Pōhakuloa and the Kahuku land that they are planning to keep, they don't commit to how they're going to retain the land, whether it's lease or through acquiring the fee, but they do express their intent that they want to keep using those two areas for training.
I want to address, Sister made a comment about conflict. OHA is not a quasi-agency. They are a state agency of the state of Hawaii. There's nothing quasi about it. And about the, about the $1 a year lease, there's 30,000 Kanaka on the DHHL wait list, which is actually a death list. It's not a wait list. All 12 of my aunties and uncles and my grandparents died on the list, the death list. DHHL does not stand for Department of Hawaiian Homelands. It stands for Don't Help Hawaiians Live on Their Homeland. Every Kanaka that has had to buy fee simple home, $1 a year, no taxes, tax-free, just like Hawaiian Homelands. Any Kanaka that has had to purchase their own land, stolen land, fee simple, receives tax-free. The county, the city, everybody. But the most important point you brought up, cloaking yourselves when you went to the Congress in the state constitution. The state of Hawaii needs to cloak themselves in their own constitution. They've been breaking state law for 67 years. They need to stand up. They can change the blood quantum tomorrow. Governor Green can sign one, and then the feds and the state can fight it out. The state can say, our law says bilineal. Why I like build on Hawaiian homelands when my mo'opuno no can inherit? Why? The state of Hawaii has the power because the Republicans, we have been downtrodden because we've been controlled for 67 years by one party. But they can make a decision tomorrow. Tomorrow they can say, blood quantum 50%, pow. I can pass my interest down to my mo'opuna. But the state OHA needs to be changed to only Hawaiians apply. Aloha, I'm sorry. Kalamai.
Aloha, ahi ahi o ko au pauloa. My name is Kaua Yohanan Amsterdam, and I work with the interim government of the Hawaiian Kingdom. I would like to express my appreciation to the trustees, members of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, for your interest and for your leadership and action that you're taking in regards to preserving our lands, our rights, our self-determination is very important. As a Hawaiian Jew, I could see parallels between our Hawaiian people and situation, and also my fellow Jews in Israel. For instance, when our fellow Jews were dispersed from the Holy Land, the land became desolate. And it wasn't until they were restored, our people were restored in Jerusalem in 1948, that it blossomed like it is today. And as our Hawaiian people leave Hawaii, the same thing is happening in Hawaii. The value and the aloha spirit and the real blessings of Hawaii will also diminish, because it's our Hawaiian people, because this is the land that our Father in heaven, Yeshua, Jesus, gave to us. And in the scriptures, it says that the house of Israel will be restored to the lands, not just land, but lands of inheritance. We see that with Israel. It's been restored. And so although our kingdom has been undermined here, we will be restored, because it's a covenant that was made anciently in ancient times. Because our people also are from the house of Israel through the line of Joseph. So it's kind of ironic. It's very ironic that this is the tourist capital center, and it's the military garrison center. And we're sitting ducks. We're actually at risk. In Israel, they have bomb shelters. We don't have bomb shelters here. And so okay, and if something like that happens to us here, we don't have that protection. So I would encourage our trustees to continue to be in there. Don't shorten the amount of time for negotiations, and stand fast. that the military even would have the opportunity to use the land is an issue. We have a right because we are the people of the land. May the Lord bless us, bless you as we go about our activities in our self-determination. Mahalo and aloha.
Could we go through, oops, sorry, a little more or a few more questions, and then we're going to try and speed through part of our slide, but if we want to finish up the line of questions that you had.
Sorry, I just wanted to respond to content you've already gone over with respect to our current context. I am, of course, really disheartened by the governor's refusal to meaningfully engage and include OHA. And, you know, just to clarify, that OHA bill was not even heard by the legislature. So there was no engagement by the legislature on this issue. And I really feel that, you know, it could be said that we have been abdicating our constitutional responsibility. And I'm wondering if you folks are considering, beyond the ban on use of live fire, perhaps introducing a measure that compels the governor to treat OHA as the entity that it is and to include them in these in consultation processes.
Mahalo, Rep. Peruso. I was going to expand on that a little myself, and then in the interest of time, I didn't, but I'm glad you brought it up. What Rep. Peruso was alluding to is our 2026 OHA legislative package bill that was to introduce a constitutional amendment to ban live fire training on public trust land has to go through the legislature. That's a process in our state before you can get a constitutional amendment on the ballot, and it didn't receive a hearing in either the House or the Senate. So there was, as the representative said, there was no opportunity for debate. It was just kind of the decision made at the committee chair level not to advance those bills. I do know that there were some proposals that were also didn't advance that would have given both the legislature and OHA greater oversight role. Right now, Chapter 171, which is the land use statute, that kind of sets out all the different steps that need to be met before public land can be disposed of. And right now, the authority rests pretty much in the Board of Land and Natural Resources with some limited exceptions. If the state is going to sell or exchange land with a private party, OHA actually does have to get advance notice, and it has to pass the legislature by a 2/3 vote. And the OHA kind of notice provision was a result of a lawsuit that OHA brought in the early 2000s to make sure that we had that. But there's really no parallel legislative approval mechanism or OHA consultation provision when it comes to government land exchanges. So the private sale provision is one part of the statute. I don't know right now if we can speak to whether we'd be advancing that, but that's definitely an idea that has been floated to give the legislature and OHA greater oversight over government land dispositions.
You know, I will say that we're entertaining every possible measure that has viability when the session starts that will protect OHA's role and what we think are the beneficiaries' interests to the maximum extent possible. So thank you for the idea. I will, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge that I believe it was in a few days ago, and I can't remember exactly whether it was Sunday or Monday, but there was an editorial recently that covered, it was a subsequent to our news release, roads made at the congressional level around AA and the pivot from a scary nation inevitability tenor to this move towards complete your EIS was noted or quoted as being in support of this pivot. So we are seeing some of the influence coming from community, some of the voices potentially informing the governor's position and having him move in the same direction that I think the community and the residents of Hawaii, not just Native Hawaiians, but anybody who cares about safeguarding our lands and not having the federal government confiscate lands of ours in a direction for more inclusivity, more negotiations, and more compliance with laws. But if the moment comes that calls for something bolder, I think no doubt we will be in the room for that. Yes. Does somebody have the? Yeah.
I have the mic.
Pardon. If we're going to break down.
Sorry?
I'm sorry. You said if we're going to break down.
James. I'm curious, as part of your presentation, if you're going to talk about yesterday's meeting. Didn't the governor's committee meet yesterday?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So if you're going to get to that, I've got something for Rep. Russo, but I'll wait as a large. I want to hear what you have to say.
So I can talk about it a little bit. So I was only in the meeting for about an hour. I didn't participate in the entirety of it. I also serve on the charter commission, the city charter commission. And so I had a conflict that I had to jump off of. But yes, the NDAA was discussed and the embrace, like the momentum moving towards doing something much more imaginative than just condemnation, exploring valuation and the methodologies that need to be entertained beyond traditional methodologies. The community benefits package idea hasn't received warm welcome or reception from the armed services. I think that that's obvious. I'm not disclosing news on that. And so something else that would speak to the continued holding of title of these lands with the state of Hawaii and not move the conversation or the pathways that the Army has towards continued use. I mean, the conversation is still around some form of continued use and activity at the governor's office, at that governor's level. So there's that, and that might not be welcome news to everyone, but I find it promising that we are moving away from a $10 billion community benefits package will make us whole if the federal government condemns tens of thousands of lands. That's not acceptable. And we have pivoted very clearly away from that narrative. And I think that that's a win. We are entertaining thoughtful ideas from literally Kanaka in the community who are issuing reports and publishing their articles in Kawaiola and in other publications that are helping to inform the decision makers at that executive level around valuation, around appraisals, around, you know, the cost of the military and the what it will take to make some of these very important places like whole and remediate them. So that is promising too, especially around Makua. I mean, that's as much as I was able to glean from my 1 hour, but I'm happy to, in our next meeting, which should be happening in about another week or two, in Kahuku, provide, you know, more details, circle back with the committee and share out any of the notes from there. Yes.
Hi, aloha. My name is TJ. I am from this āina. Couple things, and you can take this, all of you can take this with a grain of salt. I was watching this on my way over here, and I also would like to be included in any follow-up communication regarding what Anakala Tom said about the 2006 Stryker Brigade case, because I think that it's important. And I think if OHA is going to continue to want to speak for or represent or do for the beneficiaries of this āina, I really think you need to look at things like that. You have to remember that right now, here in Wahiawā, we are in Kukani Local. And it hurts my heart to no end to not see any OHA trustees here. These are just my thoughts. I'm going to give up the mic in just a minute, but I'm just going to spit it out. It hurts my heart, number one, that OHA trustees are not here. Number one, that the community was only given 8 days notice of this meeting. And also, OHA really needs to go back and look at their mission statement. Why is OHA here? Who is OHA here for? What is your purpose? And everything leads back to that word, beneficiary. So when you want to say that OHA is going to do things or because that's a community input, where is the data? Where are the surveys? Where are the comments and the mana'o that you have gotten from the community about how OHA proceeds forward? If OHA has been around for how many decades now? And as far as I can tell, they really haven't done anything to directly benefit beneficiaries. And then the last thing that I'm going to say is just a comment. So the information that was shared about the governor being able to change the blood quantum for DHHL should actually, all of you should fact check that, because DHHL came about from the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920. If the blood quantum has any chance of changing, two things must happen. The legislature must make that first move. Once that is approved and the legislature and then whatever governor is there at that time must then step forward to the US Congress for their approval in order to make any changes to anything that the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act gave us, not just blood quantum, but blood quantum is most important. So keep that in mind. You folks can look up the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920. And if there's one thing that I can encourage all of you is to learn, get knowledge, understand what you're learning, and then come to these community meetings and learn and ask. And if you're not sure, if you don't understand, ask again. And ask them to break it down for you. Because if you all take out your phones right now and look at what the mission of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is, you will see that barely 1% of what that mission is when OHA was created has even been fulfilled by any group of trustees. Thank you very much.
I was just going to respond really quickly. I do apologize for the late notice to the community. It's been kind of a work in progress to be able to schedule these and go out into the community, but we're definitely hoping that we're having rounds of consultation. And I do encourage everyone, again, there's a QR code at the front. We're going to have it on the slide. And if you do have the opportunity to sign up and register and for notice of future meetings, surveys, opportunities to provide feedback, we'd really appreciate that, because this is kind of an ongoing process that we're hoping to engage in. No.
Again, the community is being disrespected when we as beneficiaries are not given the commitment from the trustees that we elect to provide information and to communicate with us. If you folks had 10 days notice, put this meeting together, then by chimney crickets, we in the community should have had a 10 days notice. And I know it was more than 10 days ago that you folks decided to have this community meeting. So again, it's a slap in my face, a slap in my heart, and it shows what OHA
We're going to take that to heart, and I will go back to the administration and see if we can host one more meeting and provide ample notice for this community. We have made every effort to provide advance notice, and you're not wrong, more than 8 days in the communities that we are making time and space for. And I apologize on behalf of the agency. And what we will do, I will make a commitment that we will come back and we will provide this community a longer runway of notice, and hopefully we can fill this space with people who have sufficient and adequate notice. You can share that message back with the people who, if they had more time, would have been here. And I also want to encourage anybody watching online, but that's my pledge. That's my mihi to you for bringing this up. Thank you. I apologize. Yes. No. I understand. Yes, I understand. And I will take your message that having the trustees in the room to be part of the conversation is really important as well. We heard you loud and clear. So I will convey that message to them as well. And so the next meeting here in this community, we will do our best to make those things happen. Mahalo.
I wasn't going to speak. And in fact, I was going to hide out in the corner here. Wow. 1968, Milai Massacre happened on March. April, everyone was, the entire National Guard, Reserve, Army was all activated in April of 1968. May, at that time, my husband then was the 442nd. And he too was activated. In May, I gave birth at Tripler. So a lot of us you're having this meeting in Wahiawā. And when I saw that, I was like, oh no, why Wahiawā? Why are we having this particular meeting in Wahiawā? Because there's a lot of PTSD out there. And for Wahiawā, what it was like here in 1968, the entire area was filled with soldiers from coming in from Vietnam, from rest and recuperation. They were here, and I'd say more than half of them were African American. And yeah, that's what this town was like over here. So there's a lot of PTSD out there still with all that is happening. And I was concerned when I make the connection here to this night's meeting and what happened to the My Lai massacre. We need a pilot out there to stop the massacre that is actually happening in our Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We need a pilot. And like she said, the trustees are not here. So I actually grew up in Waimanalo, Hawaiian Homestead. I ran away. And then what turned me around is our mothers in 1974. They found the 5F ceded lands. They created the maps and they questioned the $14 million per year. Where was it? And the five purposes. That was in 1974. So what happened here is they all decided to get together with those organizations such as Koho, Council of Hawaiian Organization. They got together, learned from our mothers about 5F ceded lands and public trust and 5 purposes. And guess what? They decided to create OHA. 2 years later, they turned away from our mothers from Hawaiian Homestead. All that my mother wanted to do was send her children to get an education, one of the 5 purposes. That was it. OHA was created, and it took the $14 million away per year away from Hawaiian Homestead. Hawaiian homestead died 1978, Con. My mother was there. And my mother brought all the losers to my house that night. And they all sat on the floor, knowing that the revenues were stolen and that the 5F ceded lands for Native Hawaiians, because only Hawaiian homesteaders are Native Hawaiians. Only Hawaiian homesteaders. And those that were on the wait list were Native Hawaiians. Oha originally was a Hawaiian. And then Oha decided to take the N, right? They took the N, the capital N, and they gave our mothers the little N. So I'm here tonight because I am trying to make that connection with the two of you. I feel like I'm at the University of Hawaii. That's where I am right now, in here. All that was being talked about, I feel like we're going to get a test pretty soon. And I'm going like, okay, I'm trying to learn all the details so I can pass their test. Okay? There is nothing human. There is nothing on the ground yet for the people that I'm hearing. All I'm hearing is professors or we got to come up with a publication. That's what I'm hearing tonight. But what I'm trying to say here is we're at the edge. All of us who are in the community, our children, we're at the edge of genocide. And it's serious. And I don't know what to do. I mean, for me, I'm already telling my great-grandchildren, okay, grandma's all for the diaspora. Let's start. Let's do it. And then when we start to get to solutions, when the academic community starts to come to the community where our people live, what's the population for Hawaii and Wahiawā? How many votes do we have in Wahiawā? Do you know? Yeah, that is my question. And I'm going like, what are we doing in Wahiawā? I am just as concerned about why we are in Wahiawā. Now, I know the Bob O'Sheryl them. I knew Wahiawā, and I also knew Waipahu. I knew block vote. And I know Hawaiians are swing vote, okay? Because I was there. I was there every day. Every day, 1978 Con. I was there every day when OHA was created. And I was in all your meetings. OHA was created. So I know what I'm doing here. And so what is the outcome? What is it you're trying to produce tonight is my question.
We are literally here in a sharing information capacity. And we hope that we give the community the information that we have to help each and every one of you make your own informed decisions. Yeah. Rest of the presentation. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, mahalo, and thank you. And so, yes, we're going to try to move through the rest of the presentation quickly to continue entertaining questions at the conclusion. So mahalo for the grace and the pause.
Okay, mahalo for your patience. We're going to move through these really quickly because I think a lot of people know these, but we did want to, again, set a common understanding of our history and OHA's place in that history. And so we really go back to the Mahele, which is when what we know as the Crown and Government lands was created. And what is important for us really in kind of looking at that continuity of land is because what we know is the Great Mahele, Kauai Keole really had an intention that 1/3 of the land would go to the king and the government, 1/3 to the Konohiki and 1/3 to the Makainana. And that did not happen, as we all know. most of the non-ali'i were disenfranchised. Very few families were lucky and held on to their lands, but a lot were disenfranchised. But the legacy we have of the Crown and government land is that the ali'i continued to look out for the people until the overthrow. So what we had is Kauai got the first choice of land, and he immediately turned over the larger portion of it to the government for his people, for our people to be able to govern themselves and to be supported by the government. And then he kept the smaller portion of his choice of lands for himself. And those are what became what we know as the Crown and government lands that we talk about when we talk about the public land trusts. Next slide. So what we really wanted to emphasize in the context of the military leases is the enduring impact of the military really in the history of Hawaii, because we know kind of the twin forces that determined what happened in 1893 were sugar planter interests, economic, but also American interest in having Hawaii as a center of military power. So a lot of the steps leading up to the overthrow had to do with control over Pu'uloa or Pearl Harbor and the United States interest in accessing that harbor and holding it basically for its military expansion and use in the rest of the Pacific. So when we have the basically erosion of Native Hawaiian power in the government, what it was driven by, again, was kind of the sugar planter hui, but also this relationship with the United States and the United States wanting to have access to our land for military. So we have the Bayonet Constitution with it, which essentially disenfranchised Native Hawaiian voters in their own kingdom before the overthrow. And that was really driven by the sugar planters wanting to force Kalakaua to agree to a reciprocity treaty so that they could have access to United States markets for the sale of sugar. So we see that early role of the military in Hawaii. And then, of course, when we have the overthrow in 1893, we know that the ability of the local sugar hui to, or the Republic of Safety, as they called themselves, to actually effectuate the overthrow was because they called the American naval minister to bring all the boats with all the guns into Honolulu Harbor. And so we have that military involvement with the overthrow, and the outcome is both the government lands are taken, but also the crown lands, Liliuokalani's personal land, which had previously been the property of the monarch, and that was merged by the Republic of Hawaii after they overthrew the kingdom. And those are the lands that we talk about when we talk about the crown and government lands. It's the personal property of the li'i that was taken, as well as the government lands that were taken. So it was a dual injury. It was the taking of our sovereignty, it was taking of the land, and it was also, you know, in many ways a personal offense against the queen that her own lands were taken. Next slide, please. What we do see in the next few years between the overthrow in 1893 and 1893 is really Native Hawaiian Native Hawaiian opposition. And that really delayed what the sugar planters expected was going to be this quick cessation of power to the United States. But what happened, of course, was Native Hawaiians organized the Hui Aloha āina petitions that everyone I'm sure is familiar with, over 90,000 signatures of Native Hawaiians opposing annexation of Hawaii to the US government. So what was originally expected to be a very quick turnover actually took 5 years. And it wasn't till there was this larger kind of colonial expansion in 1898 when the United States also went into the Philippines and Puerto Rico and Cuba that finally the Newlands Resolution passed, which everyone I'm sure also knows is a joint resolution. It wasn't the original form, and that's the easiest form, or it has the lowest number of votes to get that through Congress. So that's how Hawaii became part of the United States, was through the 1898 joint resolution. But even in that resolution, they recognized that the existing laws of the United States would not apply to the public lands of Hawaii. So there was a recognition of a special nature of the public lands in Hawaii and being different from those in the rest of the United States. And we see that again, next slide, please, in the Organic Act, establishing basically the form of government that would rule until statehood. And it gave a lot of power to the United States Congress. The territorial government was appointed by outside powers. There was a lot of freedom for the United States to essentially take land, or for the governor of the territory to set aside land to the federal government. So we see in those first 10 years, the expansion of the military at Pearl Harbor. We see taking up other lands across the āina for military use. But again, there was that recognition that the lands of Hawaii were otherwise for the use and benefit of the people here. Next slide. We have, leading up to the establishment of OHA, a number of important steps in establishing the different trust relationships. We have the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act in 1920, which many of you are already well familiar with. We heard from several of you about this already. But really, this again recognized that Native Hawaiian lands had been taken and that there had to be some form of reparations. And while this was a small step, it was still a victory at the time. There was no voting representative, but Jonah Kuhio, Prince Kuhio, went to Congress and lobbied. And he really set the Native Hawaiian, or the Native American Trust, as a model of why Hawaiians should be given land. So there was this early recognition of the federal government really owing something to the Native Hawaiian people, separate and apart from the rest of the residents of Hawaii, based on our unique history. And that's reflected in the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. Then we have the 1959 Admissions Act, and this cedes all of the land, the Crown and government lands that had been taken, given to the United States, and they give it back to the state of Hawaii. But they give it subject to 5 trust purposes, one of which is that it must be used, the revenues from those lands must be used for the benefit of Native Hawaiians, the betterment of the conditions of Native Hawaiians. So that's one of the 5 trust purposes. When you hear that language, the 5F trust purposes about the Admissions Act, that's where that comes from, is when the land was returned. And again, we have to remember always, these are Native Hawaiian national lands. These are Crown and government lands. We call them the public trust, but they are Crown and government lands. We have, the reason we have Public Law 88233 up here is because the United States government already has an existing duty under this law to return surplus lands to the state of Hawaii. So all of the land that the United States military holds, even if it's held in fee, have a duty, if it no longer is necessary for their military use, to return it to the state of government has, because again, if they have this land that they don't need, they already have a duty to give it back to the state. So they can't say, we're going to exchange, this land that we hold in fee at Schofield for Pōhakuloa, because actually they already owe us the land in Schofield. If they don't need it anymore, they already owe it to us. So they cannot be exchanging land that they hold in fee for other hands that the state owns, and that's under Public Law 88233. We have this history leading up to 1964 that Summers talked about already, the power imbalance and Native Hawaiian voices not being at the table. And part of the power imbalance was under the Admissions Act, the United States actually retained the power to take for 5 years any land that it was leasing from the newly created state of Hawaii. So Pōhakuloa, for example, under the Admissions Act, the newly created state was bargaining with the United States to retain that land, but really under the Admissions Act, the United States could always just have taken it. So it was very, there was a power imbalance in play in 1958-9 in the way that the Admissions Act is written. And so while we, rely on the Admissions Act as far as creating these trust purposes, which are very meaningful to empowering Native Hawaiians, it also kind of held all our lands hostage, and it set this very uneven bargaining table in 1964 for the lease terms that we saw that came out of it, because the United States kind of just had that power to take the land. They didn't really have to engage in good faith negotiations. We have 1977 Supreme Court case up here, and this just affirms everything leading up to 1959 in terms of the United States holding what is called bare title and the state and the federal government remaining as a trustee for the land. And it's affirming that principle that the land belongs first and foremost in Hawaii to the people. And you hear this a lot in the public trust doctrine in Hawaii as well, is that really the right to land belongs to the people and the government is just managing it in the best interest of the people, including specifically the general public and Native Hawaiian beneficiaries, because the Admissions Act names two classes of beneficiaries of the public land trust, and it's the general public and Native Hawaiians. And this is the language that also gives Native Hawaiians the right to sue for breach of the public trust on their own behalf, because we are named in the Admissions Act and then in the Hawaii State Constitution as an individual class of beneficiaries of the public trust. It depends on what the claims are. Next slide. So this slide emphasizes really is meant to emphasize the community movements and especially Kaho'olawe as a model of how we get land back. I mentioned Public Law 88233, which is a statute that gives the United States its duty to return land. But another way, of course, that we've gotten land back over the years is through community movements, and it can take 25 years. The Kaho'olawe story, as I'm sure many of you know, the first lawsuit was in 1970. There was the occupation. There was an original settlement that required the United States to look at all the archaeological sites and to recognize the cultural value of the land. And it was only after those cultural sites that were uncovered that there was really more strength and movement to enjoin the bombing and stop that. And then we had the Congress, our congressional delegation get involved, looking at money to fund a study of what it would cost to remediate Kaho'olawe, and eventually we had the president, Bush, who was a Republican, who was trying to make inroads in Hawaii as a democratic state, offering to return Kaho'olawe, and it finally was actually returned to the state in 2003. So we have this 25-year history of land back movement. So when we talk about you know, the relationship of people to place and also the governing laws that are in place, we don't want to lose sight that it's really the people. And I think others have mentioned that it's the people and the community that really is on the front lines that has brought life to these laws that we're talking about, the public land trust, the duties under the Admissions Act. The way this has become real is through the community taking action, direct action, legal action, boots on the ground, holding the government accountable. And we really want to recognize their place in the history of our stewardship. OHA has always recognized itself as a co-steward, a co-trustee with the state, but also really a co-steward with our beneficiaries who, again, are the boots on the ground and doing the work. Next slide, please. So we're just kind of moving through quickly because we fell behind, but we wanted to, can we actually, okay, we can start here. So these are the three areas that we were talking about that the EIS looked at: Makua, Kahuku, Po'amoho, and of course, this is where we are now. And next slide, please. So this map shows Kukani Loco, which others have mentioned, and our lands, which OHA has kuleana for, to co-steward again with the community. And our hope in seeking kapa'akai consultation with the community is to really make the link between all these other traditional landscapes and the Po'amoho land that is coming back. Malama Makua has a plan that they've already shared with us and put out into the community about what they would like to see happen to the lands that are designated for return, the state leased lands at Makua that are designated for return. And we would really like to hear from the people of Wahiawā what this community's vision is for those lands that the military has said it's going to return in 2029. We want, of course, the federal government to retain the responsibility for any cleanup that might happen That's a very important piece of return of land. You know, the United States can't sever its responsibility and its liability on return for cleanup, but we would like to hear from the community about what they hope to see when these lands come back to the community, and what form of, you know, co-stewardship. It's going back to the state, but what does the community hope that will happen when these lands come back? Next slide, please. And this is actually, I believe, the heiau that you were speaking about at Schofield, which, and this is a larger picture of the area with Kukani Loko. The birthstones are in the smaller picture. And just, again, we're seeking to learn about the relationship between all these spaces and the community, and what you hope to see happen next. Next slide. So we can skip over this. We spoke a lot about some of those points, but we do talk about Pōhakuloa a lot because that is the other big lease that's still on the table that the community wants to provide feedback about. Next slide. So the legal information that we wanted to get to, that we wanted to share, is just our understanding of the pathways that are available, so that there's better understanding when the governor throws these terms around. When you hear them, what do they really mean, and what are the limitations of each of them? So condemnation is the nuclear option. It is very quick in this instance. The only requirement really in this case is for the federal government to pay just compensation to the state. So if there were to be a lawsuit or some other effort to block condemnation, most of that would be focused on what is just compensation, because it's generally considered a public purpose. National security is considered a public purpose. So the court is most likely would quickly rule that the federal government can take the land for national security as a public purpose, and really we'd be left litigating over what is just compensation. There's been some arguments raised that there could be a challenge raised about, does the Army actually need the land that it's claiming if it brought condemnation? But really, again, the case law is very favorable and deferential to the armed services, that they need this land for. Or for the Department of War to pursue this option, because once it gets in the courts, it is a very fast process, and especially because there's a quick take option for the military to exercise. Whether would you like to take that one? Yeah, I don't know if Rep. Perusa wants to take that. I mean, if there were to be a state, I mean, there could certainly be a question, and that's what we were trying to get with our live fire ban, was a ballot question on all of the ballots that go out. That's what we were pushing for. But as far as a ballot question about taking the land, it would depend on how it's framed. Our constitutional amendment proposal didn't make it through the legislature this session, but there's always next session, and we're looking for different proposals. But just an outright question about whether the land should be taken, I don't think a ballot is really the method. This is why we want to gather community consultation and feedback. There's not a voting mechanism. It's really letting your voice be heard in forums like this, that, I mean, we feel is the best way for people's voices to be heard. Yeah, no, I mean, the reason why I'm having a hard time answering your questions because the ballot is kind of limited, right? It's to elect different officials or to amend the state constitution or to amend the city charter. So just to you know, get an opinion on a position, I can't imagine what would be the exact mechanism. So that's why I'm like struggling a little. I'm like, how would what is the question that you would ask? The way we thought was most directly applicable was to ask the question about, do people want to ban live fire training? I think that's the closest step that we could think of how to get the people's opinion on use of state lands by the military on the ballot. That was the best that we could come up with. So there's a few ways I could answer that question. The conversation, the direct conversation is about just those few military leases that are expiring, but definitely the larger question that we want to press to be asked is exactly that. There's all these other lands that the military holds. And that's part of the conversation. Do you need all these lands that you have? And especially some of just recreational use, like bellows. There's areas that aren't even used for training, right? They're just for recreation. And so we're trying to also push the public law I was talking about, the one that you return the land if you don't need it. And has the military lately done an assessment of what are the lands that you have in Hawaii? You have a lot of land, and do you need all these lands? And that you know, that's not directly tied into the military leases. There's only so many that the leases you know, relate to, but I think the larger conversation we think the military needs to engage within the community is what land should be on the table for return over the long term, because this is a conversation over the long term, right, about getting land back.
So we're just, if you can hold, I think we have maybe 3 or 4 more slides to go, and then we can open up the forum to anyone else who wants to ask questions. So yeah.
Sure. So this one we kind of talked about already, but this is, so the first we started with the worst option for pathways forward, which is condemnation. And in our opinion, that's the worst, again, because that's permanent alienation. That means the land's being taken in fee. The best option at the other end of the spectrum is land back. And this again can be a number of different ways. I talked about Kaho'olawe community movement, but we actually have, in the case of the Oahu EIS, the military is identifying certain lands that it's going to give back. Makua, of course, is also the product of a long community fight and battle and lawsuit and effort to get that land back. And it's really the Malama Makua lawsuit and the end of live fire training that created the conditions where now the Army is voluntarily saying we're going to give up this part of the valley and give it back to the states. But then Po'amoho and Kahuku, I don't know if a lot of people saw that coming, or how much organizing there might be around those lands coming back. There might have been, and we're just not aware of it. And again, that is something we'd welcome education from the community about. But to the best of our knowledge, the Army's decision to give back Po'amoho and Kahuku were more of a top-down decision compared to Makua or Kaho'olawe. The lease renewal is the option that people are most familiar with, again, because it's a process that's been going through the Board of Land and Natural Resources. That's why they did the EIS, was to look at potential lease renewal. And the key decision maker here is the board, but the governor, again, has inserted himself in this process. So there's, you know, two decision makers really that are here. And we just listed for everyone the statute that governs any leases or other disposition of land to another government entity, which is what the Army is, or the Department of War. And any of these decisions by the board requires, again, the compliance with existing laws. So the EIS, which is HIPAA, 6C, which is protection for historical places in iwi kupuna, which it sounds like many of you are already familiar with from the Stryker lawsuit. And then, of course, the Constitution, which we've been talking about, the Kapakai analysis. Next slide, please. The land exchange option is pretty similar in what applies here. The only difference, again, that some are already highlighted is that a land exchange is a permanent alienation. So that would be something that we'd be concerned about. And also because of the statute I flagged, where the United States government already has that duty to return lands that it doesn't need. Next slide, please. Yes. So that was the abbreviated version. We have the longer version on our Aloha āina website if people are interested in listening to the longer version. It's oha.org/Aloha āina. Aloha-āina. It's up here on the slide. So that one has the recordings of the prior presentations, the surveys I was talking about, some other information. So oha.org/Aloha-āina. We do not have copies here, but it is on our website. Okay, thank you for that suggestion.
We know about our iwi kupuna and where they are because they are our iwi kupuna. It did not take a lawsuit to bring that knowledge to us. We know because they are our iwi kupuna. So get your facts straight, and whatever you're going to share with the community, please be mindful, especially of this community and the people that are here, community members, because again, we are Pūkani local, and we know who our iwi kupuna are, and we know where they are because they are ours. Not anybody else.
Kalamai, I will clarify. I was trying to say, I think you're familiar with the statute that governs that, not the resource.
That we did know a lot of people out there and then start to brigade area. And it that we only knew after the law came up because we knew about it from the get-go. We knew it from private community. It is not because of the Stryker Brigade law that we knew where our iwi kupuna was. We know where our iwi kupuna are because they are our iwi kupuna.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, and we're going to start with, thank you for being so patient in the back, mahalo. Yeah.
Hello. Hi. Aloha. I just have a comment slash just wanted to raise a little awareness. So we all know the housing market is like out of control, whether you're trying to buy or rent right now. And one of the main contributing factors is the military. Each single person is getting at least $2,800 a month. And so this is going to my next question, which is, is OHA planning on submitting any
bills possibly to legislature on lowering property taxes for Kanaka who are homeowners. That's just one question. The second story I want to raise for awareness is Kunia, 3 of their wells is tainted with PFOAs, forever chemicals, AFFFs, which is basically the fire retardant that the military sprays to put the fires out from their controlled burns live fires. And so they've tainted our watershed and our waterways, which leads me to Wahiawā, which is the town that I live in. And so all these controlled burns have actually gotten out of control. I reached out to the federal and the state fire departments to see what dates these areas have burned, because there have been landslides, and the landslides happened after the first Kona low. And so that's why an 8-foot wall of sediment washed down to the homes in Wahiawā. And the contributing factor is the controlled burns that got out of control, burned all the vegetation ridge side. And so that root system's no longer there holding that soil and sediment in. So when we did get that second rain on March 19th, all that, who knows, they probably sprayed AFFFs to put the fire out, but because there's no record from federal or state fire departments, they said that there's never been a burn there. But, you know, I've been doing my homework, and in August of 2020 was when there was a big major fire on top of the whole ridge in Kamananui, where like hundreds, if not possibly thousands of acres possibly burned. Maybe not thousands, because I'll keep it in the hundreds. But what I'm getting at is we're fronting the bill, our tax dollars, my town is fronting the bill. People still aren't home. And the main reason is because of the military, and they keep getting scot clean. You know what I mean? $1 lease for 65 years. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is why Kanaka can't, you know, afford to live here, on top of, you know, getting pushed out because military, everyone raising their rents because they like match what military gonna pay, which is $2,800 for a studio 1-bedroom. And so I just like raise that awareness to you guys to see what you can do for legislation coming up, to see what you can do to help lower property taxes or even make better incentives, because it's getting out of control, you know, and like they're destroying our watershed. Like whatever's happening up Mauka is affecting Makai, and they still haven't even done the proper toxicity reports, you know, like there's no tests, like proper test of the full panel of what chemicals and glyphosate forth of what fell down from the ridge side. And so that's going to cause harm both to āina, but to people living here, you know, and our ecosystems, which is where the fish and everything thrive in our reefs, where we go to collect, you know, and fish and so forth and gather. And so I just wanted to raise that awareness and see what you guys can do in legislation, push forward to make sure and ensure Kanaka stay here and get these kind of guys out.
Mahalo. I'll answer really quick because those are 2 huge issues. We 100% that agree that housing is a major issue facing our community. And we tried to introduce another bill that didn't get a hearing this past session, which was actually about a rent control bill. It wasn't about property taxes. But we've also supported at the county level all the āina kapuna taxes, which give, you know, long-time generational lands a lower tax rate. So that's a huge conversation, but we are definitely trying to look into the best policies to address that problem. And then as far as holding the military accountable for contamination and cleanup, that spans all the lands that they have, right? The leased lands, the lands they hold in fee. And that's another issue that we definitely are trying to elevate along with the community. And I think has gotten some traction, but we know with Red Hill, I mean, it's hard, right? It's an ongoing battle. So we're trying to do our part on those really big problems that we 100% agree are affecting our community. Mahalo.
Hi, we did our research as well, and we know that under Kamehameha's proclamation of neutrality law, that we were a neutral nation. We don't need military here. That's in the archives. We have the newspaper article from President Grover Cleveland telling the people not to commit treason to our country. I have the newspaper article from August 6, 1897 that states Princess Kaiulani had to mortgage her home in order to money for food, while Sanford Dole collected $1,000 a month from the US Navy to take our people out. We have the treaties that was the so-called annexation is not ratified. So there is no annexation. The Newlands Resolution cannot supersede the 48 states. In 1985, when under President Ronald Reagan tried to extend from, was it 3 nautical miles to 12 nautical miles to extend the fisheries, he sent out 20 Department of Justices. And that's when they realized they have no legal standing over Hawaii. So what did they do next? Was the 103-150 apology bill. But our treaty still stands till today. So everything is owned under the HRS 17211, or what they call the Great Mahele. That's titles of allodium. Another country cannot supersede our laws. We have an 1840 Constitution. We have a standing treaty with the United States. And our treaties still stand. And no matter how many times we share this, the narrative is still wrong. You're teaching the wrong things to our people and for the next generations, because none of that was correct. And it needs to be corrected. We've contacted the International Court of Justice because of what's happening. Under Article 1 states, there shall be perpetual peace and amity between the king, his heirs, and successors. I'm a 4th great-granddaughter of King Kamehameha III, born in wedlock through Nahi Ana. I have all my documents. I've served Governor Green, Attorney General, DLNR, filed it into the Borough Conveyance, into my court case as public reference. Our people are still here. The narrative is wrong, and it needs to be corrected. We should not be having tainted water. We should not be evicted off of our homes. The possession of how they're taking it is completely wrong, and it's a genocide of our people. And this is a public notice for all of those who are standing on the wrong and who wish to stand on the right to correct what was done wrong. It's an opportunity to make right. Those 50 sharpshooters that were hired in 1893 are the so-called largest landholders today, was through fraud, coercion, and genocide of our people. And they held their people at gunpoint. The same week of the overthrow, 800 men, women, and children were beheaded and buried at the Kawaho Church. We know our history. I can tell you exactly my kukani loko from the first birthing to me, because I am a descendant of that line. I can show you the photo of my father. I'm a 4th generation of Kaui Keoli. The photo of my father when he was younger, the resemblance. Because of who we are. And it shouldn't just be dismissed over and over. I stand here in front of you because we still have a treaty, and to protect everyone that has a voice still. Because we got evicted out of our home last year, I realized we have no voice in our own country. If we sign a voter registration and we state we're Kanaka Maoli, you get a letter from the county clerk's office that tells you you cannot vote. So why are we talking about voting? When a Kanaka Maoli or a Kopai āina from this land who's born here cannot even vote in our own country. The only way we had a voice was through a treaty dispute. Didn't say anything. Okay. Sorry.
So under the League of Nations, which we were part of, the new lands resolution has not been ratified. There is no annexation. So when you talk about condemnation of the land, you're condemning the Kanaka is what you're doing. You're condemning the people because that's their land. Alludio is absolute ownership that was given by the king, illegally overthrown and genocide. They were being killed and assassinated. Our own people, and we're going to stand here today and condemn them more? That's what this is. We're condemning ourselves. The military already started. They already started on small manufacturing arms in Schofield with drones and everything. One Navy crane is halfway in transit to Pearl Harbor. Trump's the kind was for build battleship. Why are you going to build something when the Mighty Mo is sitting over there? All you got to do is rearm it and refit it and make it the first battleship on the ocean because they need something from a bigger weapons platform. Don't think us Kanaka, we stupid, because we're not. Our kapuna talk to us every day. 130 years, they've been crying out because no justice has been served yet. And they still cry. You crush our bones, you take them away. Why? Because of the DNA. Today is about DNA and ancestry. They hide and they take our bones away. Why? Because it's in every one of us written by God. DNA is written in your bones, your flesh, and everything that you are. They can never take sovereignty away. Sovereignty is yours from birth. That is your birthright. Only God can take that away from you. The United States came in ill feeling and harm. They come with destruction. They're called warmongers. Blessed are the peacemakers. We, the Kanaka, are the peacemakers, because we keep trying to make peace for the last 130 years. And every time we rise up, we get squashed, we get smashed, we get killed. And it's still happening today. These are the treaties that they wrote before we was even born. All the information that we researched in the archives before we was even born. These are written by our kapuna, passing down to us. And now we try to change the narrative by what? The state is an illegal entity. It stole all its history from the Hawaiian kingdom. Everything the whole state of Hawaii is today is from the kingdom of Hawaii. I'll tell you that. That is identity theft, racketeering. Look under the RICO law, everything the state has done. All the officials and all the kind should be arrested. The corruption needs to stop. The coercion, the collusion. We stay in court right now because I run the kingdom plates. Because I am running on ID. Because we, under the 103, we have the right to restore our government. It's their own law. They made them in their own constitution now. And now they're suppressing us again? What? I've been in court for the last 8 months to a year now, fighting this thing. Taking a toll on our families, but we still fight. Why? Because our kapuna still crying. The bones, they're still in Wahiawā. What she was talking about, the sharpshooters, we never went through that uprising. It was them, the first provisional army, made up of all the 50 biggest landholders of today. McCandless and all of them were hired. Then we find another document that the United States Navy has been paying though to overthrow the Kingdom of Hawaii. 15 Freemasons were sent here to overthrow and make sure that they complete the mission and overthrow the Kingdom of Hawaii. Assassinated Kalakaua when he went up there and tried to start his own steamship company for the kingdom because we got tired of paying for their tariffs. They got tired of why? They wasn't making profit. So they took out our kingdom because they wanted the profit all for them. Free shipping on the Jones Act still yet. Us Kanaka no more nothing. You're wondering, why are we homeless? Yeah, we're homeless. Because they keep taking what is not theirs. You're looking at the title holders right here tonight. The Lord title holders, that's us, the heirs and successors of our inheritance from our grandparents. Who are these people for come 3,000 miles across the ocean and tell us what to do? They don't own the land. It's all clouded titles. And yet we continue to fraud. You're in contradiction of your own religion. Thou shalt not steal, covet. What is thy neighbor? Steal them. Every day they do them. And they're like us. Be what? Pono? No. Kapu pono. Starts with them first. We never do anything wrong. We never liked the war here. It started from World War II and it's still here. Japan surrendered already. Leave. Why are you still here? That's the question. The warrior So now what you're doing with this military expansion, you're making us one target again. You're making Hawaii one target, which had one neutrality law that we shall stay neutral for all people. Why? To live in peace and harmony, for prosperity of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what we practice. It's called aloha. We love without boundaries. And we're still doing them to today. So when you talk about condemnation, you're condemning all of us. The next generation. We from the next generation. I grew up on Molokai, the biggest homestead on DHHL. I lived there all my life for Leilehua, Farrington, Mo'omomi, and Pukapele. I went to Molokai High School. So when you go talk about Department of Hawaiian Homes, I've been there. I've seen it. I live on Molokai all my life. I speak the truth, and honesty. Our people struggle. We try farm. They take out our farms. I was there when they wipe out the deer. I was there when they wipe out the beef grown by all Kanaka ranchers. They came in and tell us they get tuberculosis. They come inside the area shooting, shoot all the cows for nothing. They sting, they flood in the markets with mainland beef. And they're doing them again. Just had 3 weeks ago. They're just doing them again on Molokai. He who feeds you controls you. Remember that. A kingdom that is divided among itself cannot stand. Come to this, tell the truth, nothing but the truth, and the whole truth, because you guys are under oath. Federal and state is under oath of allegiance to the own Constitution of the United States. You guys using state and federal money is called when you go against their own Constitution, which is a federal violation. So we've been fighting this fight. I've been on Molokai. Me and my cousins started to do the fish ponds. We got shut down. We got shut down by the Army Corps of Engineers coming and tell us we need permits for building a wall. When there's our kuleana to feed our families.
By the way, mahalo for your mana'o. And, we only have these premises, like we have permission to use this until I think 30 more minutes, and we still need to break down all of the equipment and AV. But what I kind of want to leave on are all of the things that you have raised that we are in alignment with, because I think it's important that we leave this space understanding where our shared values are, where our shared history are, where our shared kuleana lies. The one thing that we see eye to eye is that these lands are our ancestral lands, and that we need to do whatever is possible to protect them and to make sure that they continue to remain in service to our beneficiaries in perpetuity. That character, our monarchs had the vision for that lands were intended to be cared for, and that in return they care for us. And that particular truth that got passed down from our ali'i and has survived everything you've just described: an overthrow, occupation, the admissions, the war, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Notwithstanding all of those challenges and those disruptions and those injustices, like, we've managed to preserve that trust character in our Constitution and in our statutes. And it continues to provide like a guiding force for what it is that we're charged as an agency to do in service to that genealogy. I will also say that I'm so grateful for Lena Alalei's advocacy on behalf of our office and our beneficiaries, because it is not always a welcoming space to be a representative of OHA and amplify the history and the culture and the value in spaces where that kind of advocacy isn't welcome. And she does that every single day with her team of advocates. And that is her one charge over and over and over and over. And I mahalo her immensely because she brings her gifts to that role. And I think it's really important because this moment calls for everyone to bring whatever gift is unique to them to this moment too. So when we speak about the advocacy that we can do in our representative capacity at the legislature or in Congress or in community spaces, we are necessarily hopeful that everyone in their respective space is doing everything they can in those spaces. And that includes at the international level, that includes at the local community level, that includes when the Kehea calls to, stand and protect a mauna or to oppose the desecration of iwiku and very sacred places, to malama and steward every single day our most valuable cultural and natural resources, that there are Kanaka doing all of those things while Oha is doing what it is that our kulana and our kuleana is to do. So all of those efforts have to get uplifted at the same time. There is not one pathway forward that is going to singularly solve this really critical generational issue for us. And so to all of the coalitions and the huis and the āina-based groups, our hula, kumu, and practitioners, our mahi'ai, our kauka, our ho'oponopono, practitioners, we're all needed in this space to contribute our talents and our gifts to this moment. So I mahalo you so much for leaving time for us. We're going to take as many remaining questions as we can before my team over here says this is all we got. We got to get out of here and wrap up our equipment. Leina Ale and I will also be available off camera and off mic until we hear everyone who needs to be heard. And you had a trustee who contacted me in the middle of this meeting and pledged to be here for the next meeting. So we will make good on that pledge to you that we will provide advance notice and convene a space where hopefully we hear even more mana'o from all of you, but from all of us, from all of our trustees who couldn't be here, but will make every effort to be here in the next meeting. And for all of the staff, mahalo. And I will take your question or your comment next. Yeah.
Thank you. Again, mahalo for you folks being here. Just to address the issue that was brought up about how do we get it on the ballot. The state of Hawaii, the citizens have no right to put anything on the ballot. If you can find 17 Pono senators in the state Senate or 35 Pono representatives, they can put it on the ballot. Now, the other thing I want to mention is on the foundation timeline you had up there on the first slide. I noticed you had 1820, the Calvinist missionaries came, yes? No, I think you need to add 1819, Kamehameha II, and Ka'ahumanu overthrew the kapu system. Everybody blamed the missionaries. But it was the kapu system was thrown over a year before the missionaries came by Ka'ahumanu and Kamehameha II. Aloha, kako.
Three more. So I wanted to thank you guys for being here. It's not a tough, it's a tough seat to sit in. It's a really emotional issue, but this is a very complicated, dense issue, and there's a lot of ways to go about it. But I wanted to flesh out a couple things, especially with this NDAA thing. First of all, this bill is going on right now in the U.S. Congress. What they referred to earlier about not having, well, in the Senate version of the 27 NDAA, it's not actually in the public printed version. It's in the committee notes where you'll find this reference, where it states the military shall pursue new leases. It shall require the submission of an EIS within 30 days. And that's the assumption is the 30 days from the signing of the NDAA. So next January sometime. And then it reports again 60 days afterwards. It's not binding, and it doesn't exist in the House side. So the real fear, and I know this directly from members of the Armed Service Committee, that the real fear is that condemnation language will still be snuck in to bypass the Title X process. So we really have to pay attention to what the U.S. Congress is doing on this, because the military has stated point blank that it's going to use any legal means available to it to stay where it's at. So it's a pursuit of the way, I don't want to use the word insidious, but it's sneaky. Language is important. Words are important. Words like shall in a legal context and a bill is important. So when they frame it this way, the language does, yes, say that we'll pursue leases. It does not say in lieu of condemnation, but that's the assumption that's the way it reads out. But that's something we have to keep paying attention to. But it frames it from the premise that renewing the leases is the only possible alternative to this whole situation. That's already not legally needed to be in the NDAA. It's redundant. So without that language, the Army or the military could go through its decision-making matrix the way it does with any piece of property, which it has not done with this. There's no alternative studied. There's no, we talked about live fire before. There's discussion now at the DOD and Congress about redistributing that live fire throughout Indo-PACOM and back to USCON. Fiscally, it makes a lot of sense on some of the things that I've seen. So how do you stop the live fire ban, right? This bill that OHA put up, I was really sad to see not getting any traction, but it came out of the civic clubs, and that was really their language that put up. And it does require 2/3 super majorities, so it wasn't going to go, but it was good that it was on the highlights. What we can do is pressure the U.S. Congress enough, Mike Rogers right now, because the House side is probably the strongest, to require that this normal decision-making matrix is followed, that these other alternative studies and pathways are studied, because at the same time that going on with Pōhakuloa, the Army itself is in the middle, starting under General Wilson. His group is modernizing battlefield strategy across the entire military system. So that is spearheaded, by Hegseth and the others, and I think Mr. Gillis is on it, aware of it. Pōhakuloa has not had a modernization study done for its own purposes in a long time. It doesn't even fiscally make sense for them to continue HIMARS and infantry training and things. There are better pathways for deployment, for use. In their own language, they're leaning towards drones, AI, intelligence, and the use of these other things. So infantry isn't the most important, and it's cumbersome and burdensome. If we can make enough noise to at least demand that if there is a lease agreement, that there's no new damage to any of the land as part of the lease structure, that's a win, even if it's over a 3 to 5 or something year period, right? So there are alternatives. And that's one thing I'm going to ask the trustees and the board is to make a commitment to stating that as OHA's position, you know, that all alternatives be looked at, that we're not locked in, and that the best choice for both sides go forward. And that may circle back to the live fire that everybody was trying to get to. And there's more and more and more, and I don't want to take up any time, but you should look closely at the U.S. Congress right now, pay attention to what they're doing, because when they go to conference, whatever comes out of the end of it is what we're going to have to deal with one way or the other.
But by the way, mahalo. And the multiple pathways is a commitment that the military tag, that's the technical advisory group that OHA has assembled, is committed to. So we're in alignment there. We'll continue to report out. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I was just updated that we were actually supposed to be out of this facility about a half an hour ago. And I am going to give we're going to stay. Our staff we're going to stay behind. We're going to listen to everyone who didn't have an opportunity to be, and we'll take your meeting on record. Yes. Yes. So I will need to I'll need to get back to you on that question, but thank you for the record for putting it in. Everybody, mahalo plenty for staying as long as you did. And we'll stick around while our team closes up shop. Okay? Aloha.
One last question here. I wanted to encourage you to support OHA 5 proposal for Article 11. And as brother mentioned here, there are members of Congress who support the values that we have, as what happened what happened with the annexation. So when you find them, I think they could be helpful. Mahalo and aloha. And also to our, been very helpful.